the busiest highway on earth. I would have a few desired results for the world. Be kind, love, have fun, compete, live a life worthy of God.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Break Free podcast, where we're interviewing entrepreneurs and business leaders that are really making this world a better place. Today we have with us Jim Brady. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Great to be here.
Jim, I always have this horrible habit of mispronouncing names. Did I say your name right?
Yes, I go by Jim, my middle name. My full name is Patrick James Brady, but I go by Jim, and you got it right. B-R-A-D-Y, Brady Bunch.
Wonderful. Finally. Jim, for the background, can you please tell me where do you live and what do you do for a living?
Certainly. So I'm a CPA. I'm 4 decades into a CPA career. Currently, my wife Barbara and I live in St. Petersburg, Florida for 8 months, and we spend the summers in Western New York at a place called Chautauqua Institution. And we have 2 children. They're grown up. Our daughter's 27 and she's getting married next month. And our son is 25. And so the kids are up and they're out the door.
It's beautiful. Yeah, my son just got married on August 24th. So I took a little extended vacation to attend to that. And it was such a blessing, seeing the boy becoming a man.
Yes, indeed. So do you like your new daughter-in-law?
Yeah. We know her since 5 years ago, and her family is from Wisconsin and North Carolina, and they all came down, and the 2 families worked together. Beautiful. She's from the States, and my son obviously was born in Canada.
Okay, that's superb. So October 20, it'll be in the North Georgia mountains, so we should have peak fall foliage. So very exciting time.
Congratulations, Jim. And so do you run your business or you work for a company?
So my career as a CPA, I was what was called the Big 8 when I graduated from Bryant University in the early 1980s. And I was with a firm called Peat Marwick and Mitchell for 6 years. And then I was with Deloitte. Deloitte, Haskins & Sells, and Touche Ross merged in the late 80s. And I was with Deloitte and Touche for close to 30 years, up to 2015. And I grew up as an audit senior manager, and made partner in the early 90s. Met my wife Barbara in Winston-Salem and got married in Winston-Salem in the mid 90s. So my career has been big firms. 3 decades at Deloitte. Then in 2015, I went to Grant Thornton to be the U.S. COO for 4 years. Was recruited and worked for the CEO, Mike McGuire. And currently, right now, I'm at Alliant Group and running a subsidiary called Alliant Talent. So great year, great career. I've thoroughly loved being a CPA, serving clients. It's been a great profession and it's treated me very well.
Well, I must imagine that your experience at such a good consulting firm helped you a lot, right?
Oh,
and
sure.
Making partner at Deloitte is not easy.
I mean, yeah, obviously Deloitte for 3 decades. But then I loved my 4 years at Grant Thornton as the COO and have loved my 4.5 years at Alliant Group, headquartered in Houston, really a powerhouse tax consulting firm. But 4.5 years ago, we opened up an audit operation in Hyderabad, India. So it furnishes audit talent to U.S. CPA firms, because the U.S. CPA firms, there's a major shortage in CPAs. When I got out of school, there was plenty of talent called the baby boom generation. Plenty of people and not enough clients. Today, there's a shortage of people, hence the importance of an India operation.
Right.
And the India professionals are fantastic. They are chartered accountants, and they are the equal to U.S. CPAs in terms of quality. So that's a big part of running a CPA firm today, is being able to tap in to expanded talent, and India is the best place to do that.
Incredible, right? Because India has grown so much. I mean, in the last 25 years, I'm in technology. I run a software consulting firm. So we build computer systems for other businesses. And India has just out of nowhere just came and took the market over.
Yeah.
I mean, I have people in all over as North and South America. We don't have anybody from India because my company is not that big. But all the big firms, most of them have 2,000-3,000 people employed running software projects down there. Right?
Well, the
now
story,
taxation systems too, right? In accounting.
Oh, for sure. Audit, tax advisory, everything. So when I did this at Deloitte 2008 to 2012, and actually had the family, Barbara and the two kids. The kids were in 5th and 7th grade. We actually lived in Hyderabad, India as a family for a year. But the reason for setting up an India operation back in the 00s for Deloitte was simply just not having enough people. It wasn't for profitability and lower salaries.
Right.
It was just not enough people in the United States. And Deloitte was the first of the big firms to set up an India operation. So I had the privilege 2008 to 12 running the operation for audit and advisory for Deloitte, and had the family living in Hyderabad for a year. So our son, for example, he was in 5th grade, David, and he had a dozen friends, one French, one Canadian, one Brit, one Aussie, one Dutch, one American, just one American, 3 or 4 Indian families were in this compound that we lived in. So a dozen 11, 12-year-olds were best friends, and it didn't matter where you were from. And basically it was the United Nations of kids.
How was that experience? I mean, moving to India must have been a shock for the culture.
It was a fascinating, 10 years earlier, Barbara and I, as newlyweds, were transferred by Deloitte to St. Petersburg, Russia, 1995-96, and then Moscow, 97-98. So we had lived abroad in a very challenging part of the world. It was just coming out of communism, and the Soviet Union disintegrated, went back to 19 different countries: Russia, Ukraine, the Baltics, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. So we got a real taste of international there as newlyweds. Our daughter's first year of life, she lived in Moscow. And then 10 years later, to your question, the kids were 5th and 7th grade, and they just loved it. And it was the experience of a lifetime. If the kids were 1, 2, 3, David, they would never have remembered it. And if they were 17, 18, and seniors in high school, they would have hated their parents forever, right? So we actually lived in Hyderabad, India, in that 5th, 6th, 7th grade. They were curious, they were open to an adventure, and then came back and they did high school in the same town they were raised in. So, but that changed the family, and it definitely impacted both kids. Alex, our daughter's 27, Chris, our son's 25. I mean, they're global. They're just global citizens having lived abroad. And living in India was fantastic because it was a developing country. I think it's just a much deeper experience to be in a developing world versus a developed world. We're in a developed world here in the United States. So doing an international assignment in London or Paris would be fun. But I think they got incredible learning by being in a third world country.
That's amazing. You know, we did something similar, but not for an entire year. I had a situation back in 2011. I had a heart attack for overworking.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh,
So
you're healthy now. You look healthy.
oh, super healthy now. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
52 and I'm like at least 3 times healthier than when I was 42, for
Okay.
sure.
Good.
And so I decided to take it really easy. And my doctor told me that I should actually take vacations because I didn't take vacations for more than 4 or 5 years. I was just working so hard making the business grow. And so I told my wife, let's go to as far as way as we can go, as you can take us, and take the kids off school. So we went to Thailand and Bali, Indonesia.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
But it was only a month. It just took a month for me to decompress, came back to work. But
Yep.
the four of us went and we really united the family and seeing all these cultures and looking at life from a different perspective than just Canada and the USA, right?
Oh, yes. It's great for you. How old were your kids when you did that?
My daughter was in grade 7.
Yeah.
And my son was in grade 9.
Okay.
So very similar to your situation.
Very similar. Yep. We were 5th and 7th grade. And that's a great time to be abroad. And then you got back in time for high school.
Yeah. But actually we kept on doing it because I took my kids off school in mid-April.
Okay.
And they did great. I thought they were going to have to repeat the year because, it was towards the end of the year, but no, they did better than the average.
Okay.
So the following year, we took them out again for 2 months, and the following year, 3 months. So
wow.
we kept doing this for 5 years.
Oh, my goodness.
We went to Europe one year. We went back to Southeast Asia another year. Then we went to South America another year. Then we did like Mexico, North America type thing. Yeah, we did at least 15 countries in those 5 years.
Oh, that's just brilliant. Wow, very similar. We've had very similar situations. I mean, living abroad, it'd be great if every American family could live abroad for a year, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Or at least take off for a couple of months and really live into society.
And you really appreciate how great the United States is when you do that.
Yeah.
Pretty good country.
Yeah, my kids started to get entitled when they were in junior high.
Yeah.
I remember the first thing that I did is took them back. I'm from Guatemala, so I took them back and I sent them there for a month on summer vacations. I got them in school, so they learned Spanish, but they hated me. Now they said, thank you, Dad, because they learned Spanish.
Yes. Yeah.
But we went to the rural areas and we went to where the real poverty is, and they grasped this appreciation for where they lived and the abundance that North America has and the order, the rule of law, like we still have these beautiful countries where, for the most part, we're law-abiding citizens, right?
Yes. Yes, indeed. The rule, I mean, what we have in this country, unfortunately, we take for granted how great it is. Americans are not traveling and living abroad as much as I think in other parts of the world. And no, we're very, very fortunate. So just back to the whole career as a CPA, especially 3 decades at Deloitte, it gave me and Barbara a chance to see the world.
This podcast is brought to you by ISU Corp. Are you having trouble with your software projects? Is there a project that's taking too long or a technology you can't handle? We can help. We are ISU Corp, experts in custom software since 2005. With almost 20 years of experience, we can solve any technical problem from new businesses to satellite software. We've done it all. Let us turn your ideas into reality. Learn more about how we can help by visiting us at www.isucorp.ca. Your solution starts here.
So you guys, we're going wherever Deloitte we're sending you, I guess, right?
Yeah, 2 of those times, 8 years were overseas, right? So we were 3.5 years living in St. Petersburg and Moscow, 95, 6, 7, 8. Then a decade later is when we did India. And you cannot get more opposite than Moscow, Russia, and India. One's near the North Pole, one's near the equator. One was communism and Marxism. One is the largest democracy in the world. You couldn't get any different than, so we were very blessed to have a decade apart 2 incredible international experiences. Then in the States, we lived in Winston-Salem. We lived in Atlanta suburbs is where we raised the kids. When I was at Grand Thornton, I was in Chicago for 4 years. So we really have gotten to, but now I got to tell you, we love the summer. We're in a place called Chautauqua Institution on Chautauqua Lake. So it's in the most western part of New York State, and then you run out of New York and you're into Erie, Pennsylvania, and it's a place. Chautauqua Institution is a place where families go, people go for a 9-week season, and the 9 weeks are divided by themes and topics. And so the pillars of Chautauqua, there's 4 pillars. The big one is education. So each of the 9 weeks has a theme for the week, and there's an outdoor amphitheater that holds 5,000 people. So at 10:45 to 12 noon, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, is a lecture on that theme for that week. So for example, we had Ken Burns a few years ago, and he came and he actually did all 5 days, 1 day on the Vietnam War, 1 day on the Civil War, 1 day or 2 days on the Roosevelts. And the Roosevelts meaning all 3 of the Roosevelts, right? Teddy, Eleanor, FDR. So this year we had a week on water. You think oil is a scarce resource, water is even more. And then we all had a week on authoritarianism, where you have think Russia, think China, think Iran. So that was a whole week. So basically, each week has a theme: education. Then there's a pillar for recreation. There's a sailing center, power boats, beaches, tennis courts, 2 18-hole golf courses. Then the third pillar is religion, and then the fourth pillar is the arts. So that's where we spend our summers and go to a lot of lectures. Our kids are very artsy. My son runs the sailing center, so
nice.
That's our summer. That's our summer.
So are there so you go rent an apartment there, or they have cottages, or how does it work? There are some motels on the 450 acres of half of which is 2 18-hole golf courses. So the 200 acres that's on the lake is a lot of a few thousand Victorian homes, a few motels. And so people typically, what we did is we rented in 2003 for a week, and then 2004 for 2 weeks, and then 2005 and 6 for 3 weeks. And then 2010, we finally bought a house. And so we have a house on the grounds of Chautauqua Institution. But that's exactly how it works, David. People will come. Usually it's called 1, 2, 3 buy, right? Rent a week, then 2 weeks, then 3 weeks, and then you get hooked. But there's also a big hotel. It's the oldest wooden hotel in the United States. And it holds, I think it has 300 rooms. So basically you might have 10,000 people on the grounds for a given week. It sounds almost like camping for the whole family.
It is.
It sounds like.
David, that is so funny that you said that, because a lot of people will describe it. It's camping for the whole family at a sophisticated level. You don't go just to do marshmallows and you're the hardest thing to do in Chautauqua is to figure out what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, because it can be very full paced. So you need to come to Chautauqua Institution sometime.
Yeah, I never even knew it existed, and we're close. I mean,
yeah.
What lake do you guys have? Lake Erie in front of you? Or?
Yeah, so Lake Erie is probably 45 minutes away, but to Toronto, Chautauqua to Toronto is 3 hours. So you're close. Yeah,
it's very close, for sure.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of weather and same kind of environment, right? So it's what a blessing, hey? What a blessing that your career allowed you to experience more of the world than just the state where you were born.
No question. I mean, especially the years with Deloitte, to be abroad twice, once in a very historic place, used to be the Soviet Union, the Cold War, and then India, of course, the largest democracy in the world. So to be out of the United States for 8 years was just so satisfying. My wife, Barbara, has a high sense of adventure. I couldn't have done that without Barbara, obviously.
I was going to say, your partner has to agree, right?
I have a phenomenal wife. She's just so always up for any adventure whatsoever. And then the kids are the same. So the vacations we do with the kids now are pretty much all over the world. Still love the United States. It's still my favorite country. But New Zealand, Italy, Portugal, and we're just scraping the surface. We need to live 50 more years to do all the travel we want to do.
I know it. It's beautiful. I had the pleasure to do that with my kids.
That is wonderful.
And they were old enough to enjoy it, and young enough to be amazed, right?
Yeah.
So, I recommend if anybody's listening to me, if life allows, you have to make a chance, especially to travel with your family. It's life-changing, right?
Yeah, that's a great point, David, because when it first happened for me, I was in my early 30s, just made partner at Deloitte in Winston-Salem, just met Barbara. We got engaged and married in Winston-Salem, but we were newlyweds when the firm asked me to transfer to St. Petersburg. Called my mom and dad up to say I'm getting transferred to St. Petersburg, and they said, Florida? Wow, no, St. Petersburg, Russia. And
that's radical.
And it was quite it's so funny that we live in St. Petersburg, Florida now, but St. Petersburg, Russia. Barbara loved it, and we were there for 2 years. Then Barbara got pregnant, and we got transferred to Moscow. So
your son was born in Russia?
No, our daughter was born, but Barbara, we decided to fly back to the States so Barbara could be with her family. And then as a 7-week-old, we got on an airplane from Florida to JFK to Moscow, and our daughter was 7 weeks old on that flight. And Alexandra Claire Brady is our daughter, and she was 7 weeks old on that flight to Moscow. So her first year of life, literally as a brand new born infant, was in Moscow.
Amazing. Was Gorbachev still in power when you got there?
So Yeltsin came in 96, and our time there. Yeltsin came in the early 90s, got reelected in 96. So Gorbachev came out in December of 91, and right. Yeltsin served a first term 92 to 96, and we moved there in 95. And we were there for his election to a second term. Unfortunate for the world that his successor did not work out quite as well.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting. World politics. Canada has recently had a few troubles with India. But it's we choose our leadership, and then we have to live with it, right?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. But it was fascinating to be a part of the world at such a historic time.
How are the winters there? I mean, I have a good friend of mine. He's from Russia, and he tells me Canada is hard, but not as hard as Russia is as far as weather.
Well, I think what it is, David, in St. Petersburg and Moscow are so far north that you just don't have much daylight. So say on December 21, the shortest day of the year, the sun probably came up around 10:30, 11 a.m., and then it would sunset at like 2 in the afternoon.
Wow.
So that peak of winter, but then the opposite, of course, is June 21, and it's called white nights. And the sun might drop in the west at around midnight or 1 in the morning, and then it pops up in the east at 4 in the morning. So you basically, and it never gets dark. So in June and July, you have what's called white nights. And the winters are long, but they're probably the same temperature-wise as some of our cold cities, Buffalo, Minneapolis, Green Bay, Chicago, right. Similar to that in terms of, but it's just long, very long, and dark.
I can imagine so. Jim, quick question. Why are you still at going hard at your career after so many years of success? Like, what keeps you going?
Well, I love people. So public accounting is a people business. So my 4+ decades, it's people. You're helping business people be successful. You're helping young CPAs into the profession to grow and learn and to prosper and to become terrific partners in big CPA firms or CFOs in corporate America. So I've always loved business. My grandfather, my dad's dad, was a very successful business person in a Fortune 300 company. And that kind of got me excited about business. Then I went to Bryant University in Smithfield, Rhode Island, late 70s, graduated in early 80s, and just got hooked on accounting. And it was the big 8 at the time. So I came out of college and went to work for 7 years with a firm called Peat Marwick and Mitchell, one of the big 8 firms, and then moved to Florida, and that's when I joined Deloitte. And then the big 8 went to 6, 5, and finally the big 4. And Deloitte Haskins and Sells and Touche Ross merged, and 30 years with Deloitte and Touche. But the career as a CPA has been fascinating, I'd say, on 2 fronts: just people. Right? Your clients are people, your workers are people. I mean, it's just an incredible people business. And then, frankly, the adventure that Barbara and I got to see the world. Got lucky. Great career, great family. Very, very, very blessed. And the profession, it's a wonderful profession. Ethics. Nothing more important than trust and truth. And doing the right thing, which is what our profession's all about.
You know, Jim, that's like the foundation for any successful business, right?
For sure. For sure.
Right? Truth, ethics.
Truth, transparency, ethics, and again, what makes our country so great, you said it, David, rule of law, private property, free enterprise, freedom in general, and the CPA profession is a big part of capitalism. The contribution that our profession makes to capitalism, to have financial statements that are audited, and to be sure that investors are looking at honest and clean and accurately prepared balance sheets and P&Ls for the audit profession, for the tax profession, to make sure that the tax code is complied with. So the contribution I've always felt, and I say this to youngsters who are coming through college and want to have a career in accounting and work for a public accounting firm, the big picture is the contribution that the CPA profession makes to capitalism is enormous.
You know, this is one of the things that is being threatened in today's world, with this globalization and the return of Marxism. And it's just a brainwashing that is happening with the youth, and they just don't know what they have. And going back to traveling, right? Venezuela is going through turmoil now because they had a communist dictatorship for 25 years, and it destroyed one of the richest countries in the world. But kids don't get it because they haven't lived it, and they keep voting for governments that are so left-wing that is bleeding our countries out. And you're right, like accounting and auditing is the basis of capitalism. And you know, I am a man of faith and I'm born again Christian. I follow Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And if you look at Canada and the USA, we were founded by people that believed in the 10 Commandments, which is where trust and accountability comes from. And so if you look, also the 10 Commandments implies capitalism. Because when you say you shall not covet somebody else's property, you're implying that you have the right to own something, or you shall not steal. That implies that you have something that you can be stolen from. Not like communism where the state owns everything, right?
I mean, you think of the 10 Commandments, and if you think of Moses, you think of I mean, what religion? An atheist would embrace the Ten Commandments. Who wouldn't? If you are committed to truth and to a way of life that generates peace and prosperity, which I believe democracies do, and the underpinnings of democracy are ethics, are truth, our rule of law, of doing things right. And the Ten Commandments is a heck of a starting place. Thou shalt not steal. I mean,
yeah.
In my profession, when we find fraud in audits, we find that people steal. We find that people lie, right? But because of our code of ethics, if you will, I'm just generalizing for capitalism and democracy. Democracy is a political system. Capitalism is an economic system. I don't think there's ever been anything better, right? For all of the things that we wish were better, right? We still try to achieve a perfect union, but we never get there, and we're always trying to be better. And it's under the construct of ethics, of truth, of integrity. And you bring up the Ten Commandments, that's a good starting point.
Yeah, it's the foundation, and that's why these two countries are so prosperous. And when it's seen being attacked, for example, you know that we have increased, the last government in Canada has increased the carbon tax 4 times. And that created a massive inflation because everything uses gas, everything uses natural gas in Canada and petroleum. That's how the economy runs by. And what that makes is that it makes everything more expensive, which hurts our exports, and it hurts everybody gets hurt. And then you have this hypocrisy where these leaders that are putting these taxes on, they're flying on private jets, putting a whole bunch of carbon in the environment for 1 or 2 people, right?
Yeah. See, I just find when it comes to governing, I just find that the middle, center right, center left, it's usually, for most topics, is where you have common sense.
Yeah.
And both extremes, which I think and I hope the 2 extremes are 12 or 10% or less, probably not less, but if it's 10 or 12% on the super far left and 10 or 12% on the super far right, I really do believe that 75% of Americans are somewhere here, right? And may not agree on everything, but we're not that far apart as a country as the media would have us be. But having said that, what we see in the media is the extreme far left and the extreme far right. Yeah. This middle 75% of Americans don't have their own cable channel. They don't have their own newspaper. So it's a quiet, I'm hoping 75%. So I'm super optimistic on our country and how great it is, because we do have the overwhelming majority of our people who want to live a good life, raise a family, enjoy friends, have a good education system, earn a good living, and do well and have a life well lived. I think that's probably 90% of Americans, and that's a good starting point for the next generation. So hopefully we break out of this difficult decade that we're in right now in the United States. We've had some great decades and we've had some challenging decades. Look, no decade could be worse than the 1860s, right? So we're founded by great leaders with a phenomenal system, and hopefully we get the right people to take that system and do better.
Yeah, and you're right. Like, this is the best system in the world. Like, we have seen trials of different political and economical systems, and they all failed.
Yeah.
For example, now you have, for example, China, right? You have a communist country that embraced capitalism. So it's a communist politically, but it's a capitalist country economically, yep. and they are widely successful because of that. But they don't have freedom, because if you have communism, it goes right against freedom, right?
It'll be interesting to see how long that can continue. Right? You had a country called Russia and Ukraine, and 18 or 19 countries became the Soviet Union, but that only lasted 80 years, not 800 years, right? So that thing called communism, it lasted 70, 80 years, but not 1,000. And we won the Cold War, and that was all about a system. So I do believe that you just keep working hard and plugging away on the world, regardless of whether it's a CPA or you're on the world stage. I just love that the world came together. Let's just give an example to Ukraine. I mean, look at, not 100% of the world came together, but dozens and dozens and dozens of countries came together to help Ukraine. I don't think a country should be invaded by a neighboring country, right? So we in the United States, we really do have a system that I think is the best system that has been invented in the history of governments. Can't think of one that's better. Can you?
No, and look at countries that embrace it. For example, after all the turmoil that Colombia had, then at some point it was the fastest growing country in Latin America, because they embraced democracy and capitalism. And when a country gets behind, it's because they are, like you're saying, they go too much of one side or the other. I completely believe in what you say. If you go too far left, it's beginning to look more like socialism. You go too far right, it's beginning to look more like fascism. You don't want either or, right? You want to have true capitalism under a democratic government, right?
Well said. Well said.
Jim, thank you so much for your time. You know, it's almost
an
hour already.
It's been a total pleasure, David. Thank you for having me. I love talking families and vacations and the CPA profession and the world that we live in. These were great topics. So you've been a terrific host, David. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for your contribution too, Jim. I'll ask you one last question before we end. If you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write on it?
Oh, the busiest highway on earth. I would have a few desired results for the world. Be kind, love, have fun, compete, live a life worthy of God. That's a lot of words, more than you wanted.
You know what? But it's good. It's good. It's not hard. If we all
That's a great question, though. That was a great question. I'm going to use that, David. That was a great question.
Well, it really opens your heart, and true wisdom comes out every time I ask that.
Yeah. Be kind was the first thing that came to my mind. I think manners are important. Politeness is important. Having beliefs are important. Okay, I'm going to use that. Is that okay?
Of course, please do so.
Thank you, David.
Jim, thank you so much. If people like to follow you or ask you more questions, are you on LinkedIn?
Yes, on LinkedIn. So love to have questions and to banter. Yes, indeed.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. God bless you and have a beautiful rest of the week.
God bless, David. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free Podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.